friends. It's your teen and tween librarian, Rebecca, and we're back for another episode of Bedtime Stories. Last episode, we saw our team finally arrive at the bottom of that central cylinder, at the bottom of the crater, at the bottom of Sneffels. And we're about to see, as the professor calls, the real journey begin in chapter 18. Let's just get going. I'm excited. Chapter 18, 10,000 feet below sea level. At 8 in the morning, a ray of daylight woke us up. The countless facets of the lava walls caught it as it passed and scattered it like a shower of sparks. This light was bright enough to enable us to distinguish surrounding objects. "Well, Axel, what do you think about all this? Have you ever spent a more peaceful night in our little house in the Königstrasse? No carts rumbling past, no hawkers crying their wares, no boatmen shouting?" "Oh, it's certainly quiet enough at the bottom of this well, but this very quietness is rather alarming." "Come now," cried my uncle. "If you are frightened already, what will you be like later on? So far we haven't gone so much as an inch into the bowels of the earth." "What do you mean?" "I mean that we've only reached the bottom of the island. This long vertical tube, which begins at the crater of Sneffels, ends roughly at sea level." "Are you sure about that?" "Certain. Look at the barometer." Sure enough, the mercury, which had gradually risen in the instrument as we descended, had stopped at 29 inches. "You see," the professor went on, "as yet we have only the pressure of 1 atmosphere, and I am looking forward to the time when we shall have to substitute the manometer for the barometer." This instrument would in fact become useless as soon as the weight of the atmosphere exceeded its pressure at sea level. "But," I said, "won't this constantly increasing pressure be very painful for us?" "No, we shall descend slowly, and our lungs will get used to breathing a denser atmosphere. Aeronauts suffer from lack of air when they go up too high, and we for our part may have too much. But for the two alternatives, this is the one I prefer. Don't let us lose a moment. Where's the bundle which came down here before us?" I then remembered that we had looked for it in vain the previous evening. My uncle questioned Hans, who, after gazing around with the keen eyes of a hunter, replied, "Der Hupe." "Up there." True enough, the bundle was caught on a projection about 100 feet above us. Straight away, the agile Icelander climbed up like a cat, and in a few minutes the bundle was returned to us. "Now," said my uncle, "let us have breakfast, bearing in mind that we may have a long journey in front of us." We washed down our biscuits and meat with a few mouthfuls of water mixed with gin. Once breakfast was over, my uncle took out of his pocket a little notebook intended for scientific observations. He consulted his various instruments, one after another, and recorded the following data. Monday, the 29th of June, chronometer, 8.17 a.m. Barometer, 29 inches, 7 lines. Thermometer, 6 degrees Celsius. Direction, east-southeast. This last observation, indicated by the compass, referred to the dark gallery my uncle had pointed out to me. "Now, Axel," exclaimed the professor in an enthusiastic voice, "we are really going to plunge into the bowels of the earth. This, then, is the precise moment at which our journey begins." With these words, my uncle took in one hand the Ruhmkorff coil hanging from his neck, and with the other he connected it to the filament of the lamp. A reasonably bright light immediately dispelled the darkness of the gallery. Hans was carrying the other apparatus, which was also set in activity. This ingenious use of electricity would enable us to go on for a long time by creating an artificial daylight, even in the midst of the most inflammable gases. "Forward!" cried my uncle. Each of us shouldered his bundle. With my uncle leading the way, Hans coming second, pushing the package of ropes and clothes in front of him, and me third, we entered the gallery. Just as I was plunging into this dark passage, I raised my head and caught a last glimpse through the long tube of that Icelandic sky which I was never to see again. The lava, in the last eruption of 1229, had forced its way along this tunnel. It still lined the walls with a thick, shining coat, intensifying the electric light 100-fold by reflection. Our only difficulty as we made our way along the gallery consisted in not slipping too fast down a slope of about 45 degrees. Fortunately, certain irregularities and blisters acted as steps, and we had nothing to do but descend, letting our baggage slide in front of us at the end of a long rope. But the substance which formed steps under our feet had become stalactites on the walls. The lava, which was porous at certain points, had formed little round blisters, crystals of opaque quartz, studded with limpid tiers of glass and hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers, seemed to light up as we passed. It was as if the genii of the abyss were illuminating their palace to welcome their guests from the surface. "It's magnificent," I cried spontaneously. "What a sight, Uncle! Don't you admire those shades of lava imperceptibly passing from reddish-brown to bright yellow? And those crystals, which look like lighted globes?" "Ah, so you're beginning to appreciate all this, are you, Axel?" replied my uncle. "So you consider this splendid, do you? Well, you'll see even finer sights, I hope. Now, quick march!" He might more appropriately have said, "Quick slide!" for we were doing nothing but letting ourselves slip effortlessly down steep slopes. This was Virgil's Facilis Descensus Averni with a vengeance. The compass, which I consulted frequently, pointed steadily southeast. This lava stream deviated neither to the right nor to the left. It had all the inflexibility of the straight line. Yet there was no considerable rise in temperature. This seemed to confirm Davy's theories, and more than once I consulted the thermometer with surprise. 2 hours after our departure, it had only reached 10 degrees Celsius, an increase of 4 degrees. This led me to think that our descent was more horizontal than vertical. As for the exact depth reached, that was easy to ascertain. Every now and then the professor measured the angles of deviation and inclination, but he kept the results to himself. About 8 in the evening, he called a halt. Hans promptly sat down, and we fastened the lamps to the projections in the lava. We were in a sort of cave where there was no lack of air. On the contrary, we could feel breezes. What atmospheric disturbance was causing them? This was a question I made no attempt to answer just then. Hunger and fatigue made me incapable of reasoning. A descent lasting 7 hours without a break cannot be made without considerable expenditure of strength, and I was utterly exhausted. The word halt was therefore music to my ears. Hans spread out some food on a block of lava, and we all ate hungrily. One thing worried me, however. Our stock of water was half finished. My uncle was counting on replenishing it from underground springs, but so far we had seen no sign of any. I could not refrain from pointing this out to him. "Does this absence of springs surprise you?" he asked. "More than that, it worries me. We only have enough water left for 5 days. "Don't worry, Axel. I assure you that we shall find water, indeed more than what we want." "When?" "When we have got through this bed of lava. How do you imagine the springs could break through these walls?" "But this stream of lava may go down a long way. It seems to me that we haven't got very far vertically." "Why do you suppose that?" "Because if we'd got a long way inside the Earth's crust, it would be much hotter." "According to your theory," replied my uncle. "But what does the thermometer say?" "Hardly 15 degrees Celsius, which means a rise of only 9 degrees since we set off." "And what do you conclude from that?" "According to the most precise observations, the rise of temperature underground is 1 degree for every 100 feet. But certain local conditions may modify this figure. That is, Yakutsk and Siberia, it has been observed that the increase of 1 degree occurred every 36 feet. This difference obviously depends on the conductibility of the rocks. What is more, in the neighborhood of an extinct volcano and through gneiss, it has been observed that the rise of temperature is 1 degree for only 125 feet. Let us take this last estimate, which is the most favorable of all, and calculate." "Calculate away, my boy." "Nothing could be easier," I said, putting down some figures in my notebook. 9 times 125 feet gives a depth of 1,125 feet. Absolutely correct. Well, according to my observations, we have reached a depth of 10,000 feet below sea level. Impossible! Perfectly possible, or else figures aren't figures anymore. The professor's calculations were correct. We had already gone 6,000 feet beyond the greatest depth hitherto reached by man, as in the mines of Kitzbühel and the Tyrol and the Württemberg and Bohemia. The temperature, which ought to have been about 81 degrees Celsius here, was barely 15 degrees, which gave me furiously to think. And that's the end of chapter 18. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Bedtime Stories. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to the library's YouTube channel. You can also find out what's happening at the library by visiting us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Or you can always just go to the library's website. I hope to see you again for the next episode of Bedtime Stories. But until then, be well and sleep well.